Hello, everyone. Today we'll continue talking about Susan Wolf's article on the meaningness of life. So far we've seen two different kind of responses to what makes a life meaningful. On the one hand, there's the fulfillment view, which says your life is meaningful if you're satisfied with it, if you have this sense of contentment, not just with some of the particular things you do, but with the overall shape of your life. If you move, if you're passionate, if you're engaged, if you care about what you're doing, and again, not just particular things, but the overall shape of your life. Especially in things like career or like dedication to particular kind of sports that shapes your life, or from family, something like that, something that defines you through time. And that's the fulfillment view. And we've seen some limitations for that. On the other hand, there's the objective value view, which says, well, do things that are objectively valuable, whose value is independent from what is good for you. And there's something to both of those accounts, but we've also seen that there's a problem. And the problem has been when you only have the one element and not the other. So this gives rise to this third alternative, which is not Susan Wolf's own view, but it's much closer to her view. And she called this the bipartite view. And it's the view in which your life has both elements, but they're not in alignment. So here's the bipartite view. So do things that are fulfilling, and also do things that have value dependent of yourself. Like, so have it both ways. So for example, here's a picture of a lawyer. Suppose that she finds no fulfillment at all in doing law. But she does it because she represents people that have typically been falsely accused of crimes. So she helps people with, there's something valuable that she's doing with her law degree, right? So she sees her exercise in law correctly as helping to promote justice in some particular way. She's defending people, have been falsely accused or something like that. So she's doing something that she finds tedious and boring, but she recognizes helps society. She's making society better. But she's not satisfied with that. So what she decides to do, let us suppose, is that on the side she has, she plays the piano. She loves playing the piano, so she like plays at this restaurant, and then she's like she loves it. So she has one activity, the law, which is a way of bringing about the better world, which is the objective value consideration for meaning. And she has a different activity, which is playing the piano. And her life is mostly centered around those two things. One is fulfills the objective value, one fulfills the personal subjective feeling value. So her life is better than otherwise. But Susan Wolf says, yeah, but that's not ideal. It's not merely that you want both objective value and subjective satisfaction, but rather meaningful life is when those align. And what seems to be missing for this lawyer is that they don't align. When she's doing the objectively valuable thing, she's bored. She's not enjoying it. When she's doing the fulfilling part, she doesn't think it's making any impact in the world, right? So in both cases, there's something kind of deficient, and they kind of complement each other in cool ways. But her life as a whole is not as meaningful as it could be. So these conditions, objectivity and subjective feeling, Susan Wolf thinks should be in alignment. They shouldn't be separate. And here's what she says. So it seems to me that when we recommend to get involved in something larger than oneself, when someone says, "Hey, do something valuable," when that recommendation is offered, it typically is offered with the hope, if not the expectation, that if one does so get involved, it would make one feel good. In other words, when someone says, "Hey, do something valuable," going to help, Habitat for Humanity or something like that, the recommendation is do something that is objectively valuable, and the expectation is that in doing the objectively valuable, you will find individual satisfaction, right? So the recommendation is one in which the thought is both individual satisfaction and objective value come together, and that's part of the recommendation, the typical recommendation. So the thought is that if one tries to do something objectively valuable, one would like it, one would come to appreciate it, and one would like it partly because one would recognize that that thing is objectively valuable, right? So the doing the objectively valuable will gradually lead to the satisfaction of one's actions and doing the objectively valuable because it is objectively valuable. And then Susan Wolf also thinks, and the same thing happened with the other one. When someone tells you, find your passion, do something you care about, and so on, the assumption, not explicitly stated, but the assumption is something like, oh, and like that should be something valuable, right? So even when someone says do something valuable, they imply or hope anyways that that would give you satisfaction. when someone tells you find your passion, something, find something gives satisfaction, the implication, the hope is that, oh, in the thing you'll be doing will be valuable, right? So there's more unity than the apparent dissimilarity of the recommendations and what that dissimilarity may suggest. So here is her view. So her view is not just the fulfillment view, not just the objective value view, not just the bipartite view, but she thinks the best of the alternatives is the fitting fulfillment view, which we've seen, right? Is when what you care about, what gives you fulfillment is objectively valuable. There's this an alignment between what you care about and what is worth caring about. And she calls that the fitting fulfillment, because what you care about fits with the way the world is, fits with what is worth caring about. So why should we go with her view, the fitting fulfillment? She thinks, well, I have two defenses pretty much. One is the Aristotle's endoxic method. It makes sense of the recommendations of the wise, as we've seen so far. In the defense view is that the other views that we've considered, there are reasons for thinking that they're perhaps false, or if that's too strong, at least that they're not as satisfactory as the fitting fulfillment view. The objections that we can bring to the other views, we cannot bring to this view. So this view, the fitting fulfillment view, comes out as most reasonable. So let's develop it a bit more, she thinks. So she points out that we obviously care about doing things that we love, right? We don't have to be convinced to follow our passion. Like once we hear it, like, oh yeah, of course, that's worth doing. But why should we care about doing what is worthy of love? So the way that Susan Wolf thinks about it, we don't have to be convinced that finding fulfillment, it makes our lives meaningful. We do have to be convinced, though, that the fulfillment must align with something that is objectively valuable. So here's what she says. At least part of the answer for being convinced that what we care about should be objectively valuable, I believe, has to do with a need, or at least an interest or concern, to be able to see one's life as valuable in a way that can be recognized from a point of view other than one's own. In other words, she points out, if you think about yourself, if you think about what you care about, you don't just care about doing things that you love, but you also have this need, this concern. There's this thing you care about that includes the possibility of what you love, what you care about, being seen as valuable from another perspective, and especially a impartial perspective. So we would be bothered by someone not recognizing that what we care about is worth caring about. Why? Because we don't just want to do things we care about. We want those things to be worthy of our love. And that some other people don't love them becomes an indication that perhaps we are mistaken about loving these things. And all of that only makes sense if we also care about the objective value of the things we care about, not merely the subjective feeling. Because a subjective feeling shouldn't be challenged by other people not having the subjective feeling, right? That's why they're subjective feelings. But something is challenged when other people fail to recognize what we care about as worth being caring about. And that only makes sense, says Susan Wolf, justifiably, persuasively, if we also care about our concerns, what we care about being worthy of love, and we look at other people as cues for justification or rejection of what we care about. So what we want our lives to be seen. Here's a different way of saying the same thing. We want our lives to be seen as valuable, not only by ourselves. I mean, if we don't see something as valuable, we probably wouldn't pursue it. But we also want what we see as valuable to also be seen as valuable, perhaps not by everyone, but by people like impartial observers or by God. It is those that are in a position to judge adequately. We want them to recognize that what we do is worth doing. And we feel bothered when people that are in a position to recognize that what we do is worth doing, we feel bothered when they don't. And why are we bothered? Because that might be an indication that we're mistaken about what we're doing being valuable. And so think of typical response when someone is doing something that they care, and someone else says, I don't care about that, right? Like, here's a way, like, typically people intervene, say, hey, don't say that. In the response, something like, just because you don't care about that thing doesn't mean that others don't care, so shush, right? Like, we shush people when they say something like, oh, I don't care about the thing they care about, or I think that what they're doing is not objectively worth doing, right? When people start saying those things about other people's objects of care, what they love, it bothers us, and we kind of step in and say, stop, don't be judgmental and narrow-minded. If they love it, leave them alone, right? We have the natural tendency. And then Susan Wolf points out, why do we have that tendency? If we only cared about personal fulfillment, the fact that these other people are saying, I don't care about that, I don't think it's worth your pursuit, shouldn't bother us at all, because the only thing we care about is that someone cares, right? That someone has a personal subjective feeling of fulfillment. And that other people don't have it should not bother us at all. And if it shouldn't bother us at all, then why do we intervene and say, don't tell people that? The only reason we intervene and say, stop being judgmental, don't tell people that what they're doing is not worth doing. The only reason we do that is because we think it matters that people think what they're doing is subjectively worth doing. And the fact that other people disagree might become an indication that they're mistaken. So that's why we feel challenged when someone disagrees about whether what we love is worthy of love, because we want it to be objectively true. And we have this interest in what we do to be seen, at least by impartial observers, to be worthy to be done. And that only makes sense if something like the fit and fulfillment view is correct, if that's the thing we're assuming. So let's spell it out a little bit more. So second reason for objective value is that we are social creatures by nature. And second reason for thinking that objective value is required for meaning. So when we love something, we naturally think for others to love it too. We want to share what we love, and we want the kind of confirmation of society that what we're doing is valuable. And our social nature leads us to bring other people together so we can all love this thing together. And social nature is there, and we do that, and that's part of a way of vindicating for ourselves that the thing that we love is truly worthy of our love. That's when we bring in people. So this is not to say that societal expectations set objective value, right? It's not that we think, oh, if other people agree, then it must be true. Well, no, that's too quick. But it is to say that the more reasonable, open-minded people are agreeing that this is worth doing, the more credible it is for us to believe that it is subjectively valuable. And that's a different claim. And that's what we're after, right? We want more evidence or confirmation of the value of what we're doing, not because people's expectations or beliefs settle truth, but the more reasonable people believe in something, converging opinion counts for something. So here's how Susan Wolf puts it. Our interest in living a meaningful life is not an interest in our feeling a particular way. At least it's not exactly that. It's not only that. It is an interest that it be a certain way, that is, our lives be a particular way. Specifically, that it be one that can be appropriately appreciated, admired, and valued by others, at least in principle, right? It's not that we do what we do merely for the sake of people's acceptance. If we do that, that's not vanity, and it's not great. But we do what we do with the expectation that it is valuable in such a way that, at least in principle, other people would come to appreciate it as valuable too. And the other people coming to appreciate it as valuable too is a way of confirming that, in fact, it has value independently from my mere perceiving it or believing it does. And all of this is exactly as the fulfillment, fitting fulfillment view would have it. It's not just a fulfillment, it's the collective kind of opinion of people coming to converging on the fact that it is worthy of being done. So, okay, so that's the view. Here's something that some people may be worried. Okay, wait a minute. How can we possibly know that something has subjective value independently of our subjective assessment of that thing? And we've kind of seen the answer already, but let's spell it out. So, but is there any objective value? Are things worthy of love, or do we just happen to love things? Of course, we love things and we care about things, but are things worthy of being loved? Are there objective values or just subjective valuings? And there are kinds of related worries. One is a kind of worry of parochialism, right? A kind of narrow-mindedness. And here's a way of like pushing against the parochialism. Hey, wait a minute, who's to say? Who's in a political position to say what is objectively valuable? And there's something to this objection, right? If you look at the history of Christianity, the history of society, including Christianity, the history of society, there's a very bad track record of people claiming to have monopoly on truth and objective value and using it to oppress others, to attack others. There's imperialism, colonialism. All of that is predicated upon the thought that I know what is best and I'm going to force you to do it too. So we are contemporary society is very justifiably skeptical of these claims to objective truth, right? We fear that, and we have a long track record of history that it reveals that people that are comfortable making those objective value judgments tend to be parochial, tend to be narrow-minded, tend to believe those things not because they've done the relevant open-minded inquiry, but because they're just close-minded and say my way is the right way, and they force that to people. So we worry that that's what's happening, and that's a legitimate worry. However, that people have abused objective value is not a reason for thinking there is no objective value. That's a very different claim. So real danger is that it does not prove that there's no objective value. I'm sorry, this is a real danger, right? Parochialism is real, it has created a lot of problems in the past, it's creating problems now. But it's crucial to see that that does not mean that there's no objective value, right? That just means that people that believe in objective value abuse this thing. But people that don't believe in objective value abuse it too, right? Abusing beliefs is not a reason for or against the truth of those beliefs. So what's the answer to who's to say what's objectively valuable? Here's what Susan Wolf says: no one in particular. So in a sense, we are all to say what's right, and in a sense, no one in particular. So it's not that I get to say, it's not that you get to say, it's not that the president gets to say. There's no particular person that gets to say, but rather everyone, to the extent that they're thinking objectively, to the extent that they're thinking impartially, to the extent that they're thinking in an open-minded way. So I get to say only to the extent that I've been open-minded. Once I cease to be open-minded, I become parochial, close-minded thinker. So when I'm being open-minded, I may still be mistaken, but the thought is a very reasonable thought that he or she who's open-minded has a better chance of getting things correctly. And so who's to say he who's thinking objectively, impartially, in an open-minded way? That's who's to say. And if we have a convergence of opinion of those who are being open-minded, so much the better. That gives more reason for thinking that that's what's subjectively valuable. Anyway, let's end here. I'll see you next time. Bye.